Welcome to We Can Talk About This, conversations with Jonathan and Christa Threlfall about ideas shaping us and the world we live in. Today, we are talking about marriage, and we want to focus on 6 questions that every couple should discuss before getting married.
Yes, before getting married. It's a very important word.
Did we discuss these questions before getting married?
Yes,
Yeah,
and a lot more.
that's right.
hmm
And we think these questions are important. These questions, there's a premarital counseling questionnaire that I give to people that we have counseled before they've gotten married. And there's a lot of questions on that sheet, that questionnaire, and these are 6 of them, ones that we thought were especially important for a couple to think about before they make this lifelong covenant commitment to one another. Really,
Yes.
really important.
Yes.
Um,
So if you are considering marriage, these are good for you to think
mhm.
of. Or if you're married and you think, wow, I haven't talked with my spouse about these yet. These are good to talk about now. It's never too
Mhm.
late.
Yeah. Did you enjoy our premarital counseling times? I mean, when
I
we
have.
were doing premarital
Oh,
counseling.
when we've
Yeah.
done that
No, yeah, when
with
we were helping
couples?
out, yeah, with couples. Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah. It was those times I think were they're self-reflective too
Yes.
because they caused us to think about our own marriage and how we've dealt with conflicts, how we dealt with our past, and so it's whether you're married or you're considering marriage, I think these could be very helpful for you.
Did
So
you enjoy our premarital counseling? That's what I thought you were asking initially.
I
Did you enjoy that?
I did
Mm-hmm.
I did in retrospect, though I think I'd like to be a fly in the wall
Yeah.
and observe how those went because looking back, we were young, eager, pretty naive. But I also look back and think how good God was to us
Yeah.
in guiding us to a very godly, seasoned couple who
hmm
walked us through some things and helped us really be prepared for marriage.
Yes. And by seasoned, we mean both experienced and older.
I didn't mean, yeah, experience. Yes,
They could have been our
yes,
grandparents. But
yep,
yeah, so just some things that we learned through
mm,
premarital counseling, through being counseled
mhm,
before marriage, and then through counseling others.
yep, yep. So we'll walk through these 6 questions and we'll discuss why we think they're so important. So the first one has to do with spiritual life,
hmm
and the question is that the couple, if you're a couple considering marriage, that you should want to discuss is your potentially future spouse, are they trusting and following Jesus?
hmm
Is that their fundamental commitment?
hmm
I think that's absolutely essential for a couple to consider and to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah. And a lot of times people will reference the scripture that says, do not be unequally yoked,
Hmm.
which is a fantastic scripture
Hmm.
to reference. But even just reading through the Bible, that Christianity is not just supposed to be like something that you subscribe to and just check off,
Hmm.
yes, I vote this way, or yes, I am a Christian
Hmm.
sort of thing. It's like a whole life
Hmm.
issue.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it has to do with what is at the very root of all your decisions. And your whole life's orientation. It
hmm
affects your values. It's everything because it's a stronger commitment than marriage. It's a more lasting, enduring commitment than marriage is your
Yeah.
commitment to following Jesus. I had a meeting with a couple. One was an atheist and the other was a Christian, and they were seriously dating. And they got to a point in their life, in their relationship, when they begin to wonder, particularly the one who was a Christian, whether they could really continue this relationship. But the atheist couldn't understand why the Christian wouldn't continue in that relationship. And so we set up a meeting for me to explain to the atheist, the person who didn't believe in God, why this conflict of worldview and religion was more than just a scheduling conflict. This person was under the impression, well, they're a Christian, so it's just going to affect, like, they're going to want to go to church on Sunday.
hmm
So we can work this out. No, it's your entire life. It's how it's going to affect what kind of decision you make, how you're going to rear your children, what you're going to choose as a career, how you go through suffering, all
hmm
kinds of things. So that is the utmost first conversation to be having. Is a person that you're considering marrying, are they committed to a relationship with Jesus Christ?
hmm I think thinking about Jesus' words, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and your neighbor as yourself, like those, that's a whole life orientation
Yeah.
right there. And so even we've talked with our children
Mhm.
about this, just as they grow older and they think about a potential spouse, that it's not enough that someone just says they're a Christian,
Hmm.
or that someone goes to church, or even that someone is involved in their church. Look at how they spend their
Yeah.
money. Look at what they do with their free time.
Hmm.
Look at what they love and what gets them really excited
Right.
and
Yeah.
super angry. That will tell you their values.
Yeah.
That will tell you whether they're valuing Christ above everything else, loving him with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, or valuing themselves above
Hmm.
everyone else. And so that's the first thing. That's the biggest
Yeah.
thing. And that should, for a follower of Christ, even if they're dating, considering marriage to someone who says they're a Christian, but they just have totally different life orientations,
Mm.
that should be a deal breaker.
I think so. And I think I'm glad you mentioned that because there can be a very strong urge to, because if you're a Christian, I shouldn't marry someone who's not a Christian, but I really love this guy, I really love this girl, and so you're looking for any possible evidence that could justify your moving forward in that relationship. Oh, I think that they prayed a prayer, they were baptized when they were an infant, or their grandmother took them to church, and so. But the question is not did they go through some sort of religious ritual? Did they pray a prayer? The question is, are they bearing the fruit right now
Yeah.
of being someone
Yeah.
who has the life of the Spirit of Jesus within them?
Mhm.
If not, you don't want to continue in that relationship as moving toward marriage. Obviously, befriend the person. Obviously, love that person
Mhm.
as you would want to love anyone, which would begin by urging them to trust in
Mhm.
Jesus. But as far as moving toward that relationship that would lead toward a marriage, that would be something you would want to put the brakes on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because a year, 5 years from that time you say I do, so many things are going to change
mhm.
about that person. Things about the way they look,
Hmm.
what they like. And this is just projecting a year or 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about 20 or 30. Um, bring children into
Hmm.
that relationship. Just different decisions that you'll make. What you love most or who you love the most is going to either drive you closer together or further
All right.
apart.
Very good. Yeah. So that's the first question that every couple considering marriage should discuss. The second one has to do with your parents.
Hmm.
So, what was your parents' marriage like?
Why do you think that's important?
I think that's important because our parents' marriage shapes us in ways we could not articulate.
Mm.
Because we didn't have any other reference point. I mean, assuming let's say for people that grew up in a family in which there were two parents, or even if there was, even if your parents divorced and then remarried, or you you're looking at this relationship as the norm.
Yeah.
That's all you know. And so it's going to shape your approach to marriage in ways that you can't even understand until you have to navigate it yourself.
Hmm.
And even then, you may be unaware of how deeply you're being shaped by your parents' marriage.
Yeah. There's so many things we bring that Jonathan and I have brought into our relationship that we didn't even realize were
Hmm.
from things that we picked up as children
Right.
in our marriage and in our parenting.
Yeah.
Um, and so talking through that, like how did your dad treat your mom? How did your mom respond to your dad? Like what was the dynamic of that?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
um is so enlightening to talk about. And sometimes I think a lot of times you don't even realize that you think that that's normal until you talk with
Right.
someone else where that wasn't their
Right.
experience.
Yes. Yes.
So if there was a divorce for your parents' marriage, or separation, or just your dad was always mad,
Hmm.
or your mom was always super moody.
Hmm.
Like those are things that, just expectations that you bring
Yeah.
into the marriage, a lot of times without realizing it.
Mhm.
And so it's super helpful just to talk through those.
Yeah. I think too, there are things that, let's say you're a girl, you're considering about marrying a guy, and his mom always does things a certain way. Maybe it's whether cooking or the way she does meals or the things
Mhm.
that she does for your dad, and you just kind of assume without even talking about it that that's the way it's going to be when you
Mhm.
go into your marriage, and you're like, wait. Or let's say you've never seen your dad iron his own clothes, and so you assume it's your guy. You assume like, that's just not something I do. She's going to be doing that, right?
Mhm.
Those those tiny little things could lead to major conflicts if not talked out really carefully and really well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are couples that we've talked to, and we ask them, would you want to have the kind of marriage your parents have? And they would say no, right? Because maybe their parents have an aloof or a strained
Yeah.
relationship. It's one thing to look at your parents' marriage and say, I don't want to do things like that. It's another thing to actually chart a path forward so that it doesn't become like
Mm-hmm.
that. Because you may know that you don't want it, but you may not know how to avoid that.
Yeah.
And so being able to put that on the table. Now, I do want to say that unlike the previous question to discuss, is this person trusting and following Jesus? This one isn't a deal breaker,
No.
right? It's just one that should be talked about
Yes.
as you approach marriage.
Yes. People, we know couples who have both come from very broken homes,
Mhm.
but they have strong marriages and they
Mhm.
love the Lord and they're really seeking to please him in everything they do, marriage included. So it's not like, oh, wow, you come from a broken home, can't marry you. No, like you can, by God's grace, that
Yeah.
marriage can be redeemed
Yes.
for God's glory. So but that's definitely something you want to talk through
Yeah.
before you tie the knot.
Yeah. Okay. We're ready for a third one. Number
Third.
third question to discuss before getting married would be finances.
Mm,
And not just how much money you have or what your current financial state is. But again, going back to your parents, right?
yeah.
Going back to your upbringing, what was your parents' approach to finances? How well off was your family compared to the family of your potential spouse?
Yeah.
Because massive unmet expectations could be imported into the relationship and then be a cause of really, really bad friction. And so coming to terms with what your expectations financially, it's going to be really important.
Yeah. I mean, rich is relative,
Mm-hmm.
as is poor.
Mm-hmm.
So, for some people, they might feel like, okay, going out to eat once a week is just really being very, very strict
Mm-hmm.
with finances.
Right.
And for other people, that's like extravagant. Same thing like getting coffee out or what sort of home you live in,
Yeah.
what sort of jobs you have. Um,
Let's take our marriage, for example. You
yeah.
come from an incredibly wealthy situation.
Uh-huh.
And so that was one thing we had to talk about.
Yeah. Jonathan and I are always we're always in a competition of who grew up poorer.
Yes, it is a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah,
We were
it
both
is.
well taken care of
We
as
were.
children. We had all our needs met,
Indeed
but
we
we
did.
like to
But you have to competition
there
in
has to be
marriage.
some sort of competition.
We should probably have a question about like don't compete in marriage, but we kind of do
Mm-hmm.
in
Yep.
certain ways.
Yeah.
Foosball.
Yeah. We do.
Sport.
Yes, you have beat me at foosball many times, but that's okay because you were so much more well off than I
Oh
was.
my goodness.
But wait, one reason why I think the financial question is so important is because of those unmet expectations. And as they say, this is just statistics that sex and money are the two main causes of conflicts that lead to divorce. And so, especially as Christians, we're thinking about what it means for a person who's a Christian to enter into a marriage. The Bible has a lot to say about money and the
Mhm.
dangers of money and how that a wrong approach to money can really twist and gnarl your heart. And so being very clear on that is very important.
Also, not just what your expectations are for money, but even the place that money can have in your heart.
Hmm.
Like the the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. You can love and worship money even if you don't have a lot of it.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not only like people who are incredibly wealthy. Like people can be incredibly wealthy and not love money.
Hmm.
Like they
And people can be incredibly poor and be obsessed with it.
Yes. Yeah. So that also is something really helpful to keep in mind as you go into this conversation with a potential spouse or with someone you're already married to. Just that could be something for you or for them
Hmm.
where maybe they don't have like a high rate of living
Hmm.
expenses, but they love it so
Hmm.
much and they really, really tend to worship it.
Yeah.
That can cause problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important to talk through.
Mhm.
Okay. The fourth question. So we talked about spiritual life, parents, finances, and the fourth question would be sex.
Mhm.
Talking about specifically as you approach marriage, as someone that you're potentially considering as a spouse, what is this person's sexual history?
Yeah.
Have they had past sexual partners? Have they had a pornography addiction? Have they been abused or molested sexually. That though we're getting to a really potentially painful and sensitive
Yeah.
part of your relationship, and these are not the sort of things that this is not first date type conversations. These are conversations that you have when you're looking at a serious commitment and entering into that covenant relationship, because as Christians, we believe that the only proper place for sexual expression is within a covenant, the covenant of marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't belong anywhere else. And where there has been past sexual failure, that needs to be talked about
Mm-hmm.
because that has affected you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's affected your understanding of sex
yes,
and
yeah,
what sex is for,
yeah,
and it could, if you have been abused, um, that it could make you feel like sex is wrong
hmm
and just dirty
yeah. It
too.
could make you feel ashamed of your body.
Mm-hmm.
It could, in some cases, uh, trigger past experiences that could cause you to just like withdraw
Yeah.
and that can cause a serious tension within the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And these might be some things that you have to seek some help from someone else to really help you work through this and
Yes.
walk through this, especially in the case of sexual abuse. That someone who is familiar with this and
Mm-hmm.
how the impact it's had, that
Different
you
questions
right,
to talk through.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But this would be something to definitely talk about um, with someone who's your future spouse, and to be
Mm-hmm.
open with that.
Yes, and for couples that we counsel, there are a lot of questions we have under this
Right.
category.
Yeah.
Um, Not all of them do we expect or necessarily desire to talk through all these details with, but
hmm
we want to make sure that they are talking about them,
hmm
and that they are just being open
hmm
with each other. Because a couple's sexual life is just one part
hmm
of the marriage as a whole.
hmm
And if their sexual life is not doing well, there are other aspects of their marriage that
Right.
aren't doing well.
Right.
It's all
We're holistic. We're
yes.
holistic people, and sex is just one part of the organic unity of who we are.
Yeah.
And but also because it is so intimate and so private and such a potential source of shame and embarrassment, unlike financial situations, unlike um, something like, I had this, bad experience in the past with something other, it's harder to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are less likely to get help in that area.
Yeah.
And by harder to talk about, I think rightfully so. There is a sense in which we should be more careful with that topic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but again, it does require a great deal of sensitivity. Should be talked about within. If there's someone you're considering um, getting married to, and you have some things in your sexual past, or that person does, those are important to talk through and to
Mm-hmm.
prayerfully commit to the Lord. Say, Lord, how do we walk through this, and enlist help if needed.
Yeah. And even just the topic of sex, like what are your expectations
hmm
with this? Like talking with your future spouse about that. Because there's some weird ideas out there.
Right.
There's some weird, and not just weird, but like
Wrong
very
ideas. Yeah.
wrong
Yeah.
expectations and different things. And through love, serve one another. That applies
Yeah.
to every area of your life and of your marriage. It includes the sexual life.
I would say too, with the prevalence of pornography,
Yeah.
I think that probably that probably makes everything more difficult because it can normalize weirdness
Yep.
in sexual
Yep.
relationships and then import again assumptions about it that the other may not even be aware of.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's so important to talk about that. And
Mhm.
so like if there's been addiction to pornography, to be to uh to confess that
Mhm.
and to begin to think what's the path forward so that past addiction doesn't bring a heartache and an
Mm.
ongoing strain into the relationship.
Yeah.
So the role of sex is very important.
Yes.
So the fifth question to discuss would be how you deal with conflict.
Mhm.
I like to ask couples if they come to me and say, "Hey, we're thinking about getting married. Would you do our premarital counseling or would you do our wedding?" One of the first questions is, "Have you had a big conflict?" And because I want to know how they work through that.
Yes. Yeah. Now I'm trying to think about conflicts that we had before we got married. I mean, obviously we broke up, so there's that. But other big arguments,
I can
because I wouldn't call the breakup an
strains. No,
argument
no. I
necessarily.
can think of strains or things that just. I could think of something, and I
So
think I have the courage to say it too.
it would be embarrassing.
It,
Who does it throw under the bus? Both of us?
probably more you than me. So
Okay. Go
no, no.
ahead.
I
That's
think it's
fine.
be okay. But and I think it there. I have some culpability here too. Is that you were uncertain about changing your last name,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and I felt hurt by that.
Yeah.
I
I
was
didn't
too. I
think
was
that was a big deal though.
No, that was partially me being ultra sensitive. It's like the very idea that you would not want to just embrace my identity and my name was like, oh, does she really love me? Or there
No,
was just
I was I remember words that I said. I remember I was really harsh about it too. So
and I may perhaps and also I was insecure and overly sensitive and didn't know how to take it, and so but we worked through it.
yeah. Yeah, and I don't remember us coming to blows with
Oh man, things have got crazy.
I just remember I just remember
You're on the
that was
phone. I remember where I remember talking on
yeah.
the phone about it.
Yeah. So
Um,
we couldn't come to blows. Is that what you're saying?
we were safe. No, I think though that if a couple tells me they've never had a conflict, they've never had a disagreement,
Yeah.
then my first thought is, then you don't know each other. You don't understand each other.
Or just
You've ignored some
let's
things.
talk about a lot of things.
Yeah, you
Because
haven't.
you can't think the same about everything.
Right. Yeah, you don't. You haven't treated each other as independent, fully autonomous human beings, and by that I mean someone with opinions and thoughts that are inevitably going to disagree with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So have a disagreement, not on purpose. Don't just be rude, but understand we clash on this.
Yes.
The question is not, do we have disagreements? The question is, how do we work through these conflicts?
Yes. How do you respond?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and I want to know, and I think that as a person who's considering marriage, you want to see how your future spouse responds when the two of you don't get along.
Hmm.
Often that what I ask is this: is she the sort of person, or are you the sort of person that tends to just withdraw and clam up
Mm-hmm.
and just be really quiet, or do you just kind of explode,
Yeah.
right? Or do you tend to just get really argumentative and escalate the situation?
Or do you not want to talk about
Do you
it?
conflict avoidant?
Shelf it.
Right. Yeah. Any of these,
Shelf it. Shelve it.
shelve it, shelf
Shelve it.
it. Any of these approaches can be bad,
Yeah.
and so analyzing some of the conflicts not for the purpose of just like digging up the past, but to almost like when you do like after on a sports game, like you see a play and you watch the reruns of it to see like what went wrong and
Mm-hmm.
how can we make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, that's good.
So anything you want to say about conflict?
It's just a
It's a
huge,
big deal.
huge topic.
Yeah.
But we're just like scratching the
Right.
surface.
Yeah.
We've done a couple episodes on communication in marriage and even how to talk with people you disagree with.
Hmm.
So those could be helpful that go into more detail, but this is definitely something to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Last
And
one.
final one, it is how you make decisions. Discuss who is going to make decisions, how you make decisions. Here's one exercise that I have people who are planning to get married do. I have them make two lists. On one list, they will write out decisions that they believe a couple should discuss together before acting upon,
Mm-hmm.
and another list of things that they think that they can do without
Mm-hmm.
their spouse knowing or without having to like talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And by comparing those two lists, you can get an idea of whether there's some potential conflict. Like if the person thinks, oh, yeah, I can make a pretty major purchase. And I think going back to the finances question, you need to define what constitutes a major purchase.
Yeah.
Talking about like $50 or $1,000. Would it be okay to spend that amount of money without saying anything to my spouse about it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And your potential spouse may be like, oh, I would never want you to make that kind of purchase unless I knew. And you're like, well, that kind of seems overbearing, a
Yeah.
little controlling to me.
Yeah.
You got to talk about that. It's really
Yes.
important.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think going back to the submission in marriage, like what does that even mean? There are a lot of weird ideas about this too,
Mhm.
where sometimes there can be a spouse, sorry to pick on a man, but like
That's
sometimes
what it tends to be.
it tends to be a man who is just super controlling and overbearing and would never want his wife or someone he married to make any decision without him having the idea first, or and can be very nitty gritty
Yeah.
with that. You want to talk about that
Right.
before you say, okay, till death do us part. Like,
Yeah.
talk about that with someone before you get married to them.
I think there should be warning signs, girls,
Yes.
about that in a guy as you're dating.
Yes.
If he feels really uncomfortable anytime he doesn't know exactly where you are. At first, it may be a little flattering to you because you think, oh, man, he really cares for me. He wants to know where I am all the time. He's really attentive. But could it be possible that that's this obsession with control,
Yeah.
and he can't handle not having control and total knowledge about you at all times about all things? That's really dangerous.
Yes.
And yeah, it definitely can be the man who tends to be but I think the girl can be controlling in a way, manipulative in certain ways,
Yes.
and extremely possessive and extremely jealous. That's going to have some bad repercussions. So talking through, how do we make decisions together as a couple?
And what decisions should we make together?
Right. Yeah.
And even just the desire to want to talk through things together. There should be an aspect where you want to make decisions together, not necessarily what brand of flour should we buy at the grocery store? Not
No, I feel strongly about that.
but other things, and things with if children come along, you want to talk about, and you want to get each other's perspective on those larger things. But it just all goes back into communication.
That's right. Yeah. Which is one topic that kind of is a theme going throughout all these, is the ability to communicate well.
Yes.
So these are 6 questions every couple should discuss before entering into marriage. We've talked about spiritual life, parents, finances, sex, how you deal with conflict, and how decisions are made. And hopefully this is helpful for you. Hopefully if you're dating or engaged, or you're looking toward a marriage relationship, or even you're married and you really want to think through, how do we deal with these things? Hopefully these can be some points, springboards of conversation for you and your spouse or future spouse.
We'll have more resources on our site, wecantalkaboutThispodcast.com.
Thanks for joining us.